What's going on? It's your man Big A, and today's episode is all about them chicken and ribs. We about to put them chicken and ribs on the smoker. Before we start, let me give you some tips and tidbits. Now, today's first tips and tidbits is about the smoking wood. Now, you saw my episode on wood chips, and yes, I was very methodical in the way that I presented it because wood chips is important. So today, the tips and tidbits is about the type of wood chip when you're cooking two separate types of meats. And we're doing chicken and ribs all in the same smoker. So the first one is hickory. And take a look here. If you look here on the side, right, it's good for the beef as well as the chicken. But keep in mind that it's going to give you a sweet and strong taste. So that's hickory. The other one is the post oak. Now again, this is also good for the beef as well as the chicken, and that's what we're doing today, some ribs and chicken. But this one is going to be a little more subtle and a little more mild. So the question on the wood chips is, Big A, what type of wood chips should I actually use? And again, I'm going to leave it to you. It's about the flavor, right? So on one side of it, depending on how you season your meat, you're gonna get a strong type woodsy smoke flavor, and that's the hickory. But if you want something mild, you want that smoke flavor locked in, but you don't want it to overpower all the time and effort you put into your seasonings, then you're gonna go with a post oak because that's gonna be a little more mild. Now, in my previous episodes, if you look back, you'll notice that I talked about brining. Now, some people will do a wet or a dry brine, right? That's in the previous episode, but they tend to just use salt. And my thing with that is all you're doing is really creating a salty meat. And the thought is to break it down and make it tender. Yeah, well, I do something a little different. If you look here at my meat, remember I talked about the Ziplocs? Now I've seasoned my meat with that special K7 seasonings. You know how we do. And I let that sit overnight wrapped up in this handy log Ziploc bag. And the thought here is that when you are smoking your meat and you're putting all that seasoning, here's the ribs on this side I've got the chicken, you're putting all of that coating, all of that rub on the outside of your meat, when in fact, you want your meat flavorful all the way through. So I'm going to show you something that I'm going to do before we put these on the smoker to ensure my meat is flavored. I call it all the way to the bone, not just on top, right? But all the way to the bone. All right, so now we're about to prep our meat. Now, on the previous episode, if you watch back, I talked about injecting, right? Injecting your meat, and that helps keep it nice and tender. Now, I showed you the technique where you can melt some butter, add a little water to keep it solidified, right? Put it on low. The injection tip is metal, so you can take that and put that fresh melted butter into your meat. Or for those that are, I don't want to use the word lazy, but if you want to, you can also do this. You can buy injectable butter. Injectable butter, people, I want my monies. The great thing about buying this is that it comes with a tool here. Check this out. It will come with your own injection tool. So if you don't have an injection tool, you go out and you buy, if you order, you can also order this. It's called injectable butter. It has some great flavor to it, so you don't have to do much. All right, so this is for those that want to make it good and simple. Go ahead and buy you some injectable butter. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to inject this chicken in a second. Here's another tips and tidbits. The smoking / barbecuing aficionados, right? That's what we're going to call them. They talk about not piercing their meat. Well, my thing is if you lay a heavy coating, right, on top of your meat, right? Take a look at these ribs. You lay a heavy coating on top of your meat. How do you ensure that a cut of meat like this chicken breast or that turkey breast is flavored all the way through? Yes, you can use your injection, and that is supposed to add the flavor all the way through. But this is the Big A method of ensuring my meat is flavorful all the way through. Now, notice you can't see it here, but look here on the side. I put a little slit up in the side of that meat. And you know why I did that, right? I'm going to run some seasonings all through there, and then I'm going to close it down. I did it on the other side. Look at the size of this breast, right? Slit it right there. I'm going to run my seasonings all the way through there. And again, notice, I'm going to get intimate. all with my meat. Now, the reason why I do this is, have you ever eaten a piece of chicken or you bit into a top of a rib and yeah, it's flavorful, but just right on the top? How about when you cut through it, you want that flavor all the way through your meat? So this is my method of getting that flavor all through my meat. The same thing comes here with this drumstick. Look at that. Put a little slit there because I'm going to run some seasonings all up in there, so as it cooks down, it's going to flavor the entire drumstick. That's the Big A special method on how I flavor up this food. All right, now that you got all that good seasoned butter, right? We about to inject this chicken with it. Now, the tool is pretty simple. You go ahead and grab the tool here. Let me try to do this with one hand here, all right? And you're just gonna pull back on the injection. And once you pull back on it, you'll see here that it's filled and it's ready for the chicken. Now, to get all in there, right, you wanna make sure you get intimate with your meat. So you inject fully, and then as you push, you're gonna slowly pull out. You don't have to put it all in there, right? Go to another part of the meat, inject deep, and then go ahead and push and slowly pull out. And we're gonna do that all around this chicken to make sure it's fully injected. That is gonna add the tenderness and the flavor to your finished product. Right, now that you've taken the time, look at that. I make sure that I inject all up in the leg, all in the brow. I mean, you can see how the injection is oozing out. This is helping. Now, keep some of your melted butter off to the side. I'm going to show you what we're going to use this for. Today is a special episode. We are going to spritz our chicken and wrap our ribs. And that is going to be halfway through the cook. And I'm going to show you the differences and why I choose to spritz the chicken, but then wrap the ribs. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and prep our smoker for today's event. As you can see here, I'm all bundled up because looking in the background, right now with the wind chill, it's about 13 below zero. Again, it's never too hot, never too cold to smoke some meat. Today, we're gonna go ahead and use a post oak. I'm gonna go with the post oak because we're doing the two types of meat, chicken and ribs. All right, let's go ahead and do a little bit of a recap. Seasoned down the meat, we injected it, right? We made sure that either we seasoned it overnight or we're seasoning it fresh, right? I want you to have fun with it because if you're not having fun cooking, then you ain't really cooking. We call it putting a little love up into your food. The next thing we did is we decided on what type of smoking chips, right? I went with a post oak because I want that subtle yet mild flavor to my meat. The next thing, and I didn't show you this, but I'm gonna let you know this because it was extremely cold, 13 below. Brother had to get up back in the house. I set my temperature, I'm this dude, I set my smoker always at 250. Why do I like 250? Because it gives me that 4, 5, 6 range. What do I mean by that? Depending on the cut of meat, at 250, I'm either gonna cook it for 4 hours, 5 hours, or 6 hours, right? The more meat that I'm smoking, I might tend to cook it longer, right? The bigger, the briskets and the things like that require a longer cook. No matter what, I'm not smoking my meat longer than 6 hours for the type of meat I'm doing because that's for dinner. Right now it's around noon, around 6 o'clock we eating. Now the technique that I'm showing you today, we've got the ribs on the top rack, we've got the chicken on the bottom rack. I set it for 250 at 6 hours. Now that might seem like a long time for the chicken side of it, as well as a long time for one rack of ribs. But what's gonna happen is halfway through the cook, about 3 hours in, I'm gonna take those ribs and I'm gonna wrap them. And I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna add a little water to the bottom of it. I'm gonna wrap it and seal it tight. This is going to re-tenderize that top skin. You ever bit into like a rib and then the top skin is what I call kind of chewy. It's almost dry. Even though the ribs is tender, it's that top skin that's kind of dry. Well, this wrapping technique will ensure that when you bite through, whether it's top skin, bottom skin, whatever, it's going to be a tender bite all the way through. The other side of this is inside of the smoker, both meats, the ribs and the chicken, they are bone down, meaning I place the full rack of ribs with the bone down. I place the chicken with the hard bone down. Now, the chicken, on the other hand, you're like, yo, Big A, 250, 6 hours for the chicken, ain't it gonna dry out? But this is where the injection came in, right? And then the other technique I'm gonna show you, because chicken needs to have some type of texture on the skin part of it, right? So we're not worried about the outside as much because I'm gonna spritz that down and I'm gonna show you. But we're worried about keeping the insides nice and tender and juicy. And that's what injection was all about. So you watch the episode on injection so you can see how important it is to get your injection fully through the meat, all through the meat. And that way, as it cooks through on this nice low temp, it's going to be flavorful and smokeful and just wonderful. So we're going to check back in at the 3-hour mark. Yeah, so this is the second part where we're going to go ahead and wrap these ribs. But before I do that, I want to talk about spritzing, right? So this is a basic spritz bottle here, a little spray bottle. I got a big one. You can get a small one. The benefit of this is when you spray down the top of your meat, right? I want you to think about yourself outside and it's hot. Think Vegas heat, right? You walk underneath one of those little spritzers, right? And just moisten up the skin on top. Well, that's the same thing with spritzing. People got different techniques. They use apple juice. Some use a apple cider vinegar or a red wine vinaigrette. I mean, there are so many techniques. I want you to do the research because based on how you choose to spritz your meat will affect the flavor. Now me, I'm very basic. I put a lot of time into seasoning, overnight seasoning, putting in the rub, that special K, you know what I'm saying? Spices going on there. I don't want nothing to either add or take away from the flavor of my meat. So when I spritz with a little, what I call salt water, right? It's the water here and I put a little salt in there and I spritz over the top of the meat with that. That's what I use. But do the research, have some fun with it, find out what type of spritzing method works for you. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna prepare myself. I'm gonna go out there. Remember the chicken, we just gonna spritz it. But when it comes to the ribs, I'm gonna wrap them. And the reason why I'm gonna wrap them and seal them tight, I use a heavy duty aluminum foil. Some people will use what they call like a butcher's paper. I don't like paper my meat touches, so I use aluminum foil. And you'll also notice that when they put the meat in a wrap, depending on the person, they also have a technique. Some of them put a little bit of apple juice in the bottom. Don't really know the benefit of that. I guess it could add, as it evaporates and moistens the meat, a little bit more to the flavor. But if you're doing good, like I'm doing good, and you seasoning up your meat, again, when I wrap mine, I'm gonna put a very little bit of water at the bottom of that aluminum foil. I'm gonna wrap it tight and then we throwing it back in there for 3 hours. All right, let's open up this smoker, y'all. All right, take a look at this here. Ooh-wee. See that meat there is cooking. See the ribs up top? That's what we gonna wind up wrapping. But look at our chicken here. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna show you here. I'm just gonna spritz on top of that skin, right? And what I'm doing by spritzing that skin, I'm just moistening it up just a little bit. And I'll come back and I'll spritz that skin, now that we're on the last 3 hours of the cook. Maybe every, hour I'll come and give it another little spritzing over the top. And that's just so that top skin doesn't dry all the way out. Again, you can wrap it and that will also help. But I'm not going to wrap it. I'm just going to let that top skin get to a little bit of spritzing so you can see the difference. It's still going to be biteable all the way through, and I'm about to wrap them ribs. Yeah, so I know I told you to keep some of that good old butter sauce off to the side. Now, some people will take it, as you see here, and pour it over them ribs, right? And then seal it up tight. Another method, which I'm going to use, is right at the final stage of the cook. I'm going to take this butter sauce and I'm going to drizzle it all over my chicken skin, right over the top, right? Softening it up, getting a little bit more flavor in there. So now that we in the final stage, I'm about to pull this meat off. I'm going to go dribble some of this melted butters over the top. So right now, we's at the final. I took the food off the smoker. And let me tell you something, my smoker name is Bubba. And Bubba be cooking. So I'm gonna have you come over here and I wind up taking that chicken off of it. And like I say about that chicken skin, you see that right there? And I sauteed it with all that leftover butter. Now remember what I told you about wrapping them ribs. The reason why you wrap them ribs is when you get ready to bite in, it's gonna look at that, tender to the bone. And you can't have a meal like this, chicken and ribs, without making sure you got that baked macaroni and cheese. So for everybody who know me, I want to say this is smoking, no joking, with Big A, and we about to eat butter all up on the fingers.